All right, good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, April 12th, 2016, and this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is 40 degrees and overcast here in upstate New York. I think it finally dried out. We had an entire day full of rain yesterday, but almost 50, so it's pretty spring-like here, and I am happy about that. So where do we leave off yesterday? We titled the show CRISPR, Making Molecules, Drugs on Demand, and DNA Storage. And if you remember, they had 3D printers that were printing molecules out of the raw materials. So if you needed some rare substance out of the roots of a rare flower found only in the Peruvian jungle, don't worry about that because we can print your substance now. We also discovered that they're going to use some of that same technology to create 3D printed drugs. Right now, they only had 4, but they were working on many more, and they were going to start providing those pharmaceuticals at a much lower price and in vending machines, print on demand. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story, especially considering that it is the pharmaceutical company who is going to benefit. But I found a story I just wanted to mention while we are on this topic right now. And give me 1 second. We're going to scroll if it scrolls. Last night there was a story that was one of those moments with a raised eyebrow going, what? But it all makes sense now after what we just talked about yesterday. Pharmaceutical giants get rid of Giant One gets rid of all patents in developing countries? What? After we just saw this big battle in this hidden super secret TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and a lot of it we discovered after the fact was about protecting copyrights, one of them being the pharmaceutical companies. They were complaining that they wanted to extend their patents, especially on some of the newer mad science gone mad drugs that, of course, cost a lot of money for R&D, and that would be your biologics. But they're generic brand drugs. They're going to remove the patents. Now, is it because they know this technology is coming and nobody will be able to produce it as fast as them, hence sell it as cheap as them? I almost think that there's something to this. I just know the second I saw the story, it made me go, there is no free lunch. But I think we figured it out. Let me just read a little bit of this really quick because we know how much we love to hate pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical giant gets rid of all of its patents in developing countries. Health experts have welcomed an announcement by pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline, like even more surprising, that it will stop seeking patent protections in developing and low-income nations, which will allow cheaper generic versions of name brand drugs to be sold to the public. So let's get rid of all the patents. Let's let the drugs be really cheap, and let's get all these new 3D synthesized synthetic generic drugs printed in a 3D printer with synthetic molecules, and let's test them on third world poor nations. Hey, that's a plan. We've seen that a lot of times. While IP protective medications can often be expensive, even in high-income countries. In the world's poorest nations, they tend to be completely unaffordable. And until now, patents have prohibited patents have prohibited generic alternatives from being sold to patients. So to address this, GlaxoSmithKline recently released details of a softer approach to enforcing the company's intellectual property, reflecting a fair system for poorer countries. So they probably going to make those poor countries like buy a 3D printer and do vending machines at every street corner and give them a cut, just like the vending market does with cigarettes or candy bars. You know, there's some pretty lucrative money in that under a new plan. GlaxoSmithKline says it will no longer file patents for its medicines in the world's 50 least developed nations and low-income countries, which means that when it brings out a new HIV or cancer drug in places like Afghanistan, Rwanda, and Cambodia, it won't prevent other manufacturers from supplying generic, more affordable versions of the medication. The move is hailed by health experts as welcome development from one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. While it could have been spurred on by rival company Merck and Roche, previously announcing similar initiatives. See, I missed that one. But it is hard to disagree in principle with a move that could help make medicine more accessible to the world's poorest people. I'm telling you guys, this is not about philanthropy. Okay, we know that. There is no pharmaceutical company that I've read about yet that's all about philanthropy. It's always about the stockholders of the corporation. We need stockholder value, which means you need the stock price to go up. You cannot be giving away potential profits to poor countries because you feel bad for them. So there's something in it for them. And that 3D printer, I definitely think there's a moneymaker there. They could be pumping these drugs out with no Indonesian factory. They could cut in whoever puts that vending machine out there, and I think that there would be profits for everybody. And the poor people now become guinea pigs with this new technology. Access to medicines for patients on a global basis is vital, and it's good to see an innovative approach like this to ensure that it happens. In lower middle income countries, GlaxoSmithKline says it will continue to file for patents, so only in the lower middle income, not in the low income, only the lower middle income. But it will work on licensing arrangements to allow the supply of generic drugs. And one of these things would have to be a big deal by itself. When you put them all together, it's quite a strong statement. So the fact that they're not going to file patents in the really, really poor countries, and they're only going to file patents but then allow use and licensing agreements in low to middle income countries, yes, that's such a huge deal. But while the new direction is being praised by some in the pharmaceutical industry, questions remain over how effective the scheme will actually be in terms of making medicine available to the world's poorest people. Many of these countries were exempt from patent enforcements until 2033 anyway. I didn't know that one either. Under a waiver from the World Trade Organization. Although the benefits of the New Deal means that such exemptions will no longer be necessary, especially if other pharmaceutical companies follow suit. And even though the new plan in theory could help remove some restrictions on access to medications for up to 2 billion people in 85 countries, that's a big lost profit. There's way more to this than what we're seeing here, I think, people. Others say that the patent issue is only one part of the puzzle in improving health in remote and developing places. Yes, we need to have Bill Gates developing more genetically modified mosquitoes to release in third world nations as well. The impact of this move and the treatment of cancer and other diseases in individual countries will depend on whether there is local adequate healthcare infrastructure that will allow the safe use of powerful new drugs in an appropriate group of patients. And don't worry about that either. We have telemedicine coming fast and furious, and as we're releasing Google Loom balloons all over so you can get your cell phone internet access in Africa, we'll take care of that. There, don't you worry. Make sure you just give it all for free, because there are going to be people clamoring for your drugs. We'll have to make sure we can monitor them with biosensors remotely. But you will have a guinea pig petri dish that's 7 billion plus people big. So just erase that R&D line item budget. We're giving it all up to the pharmaceutical companies. It's frightening. It's frightening. They want to get it in everybody's hands. And we're just going to give it away for free. That's how they do it. And don't forget that with these new technologies, we're going to offer you the cure for cancer. Did you hear that? We have new treatments for cancer. We got all those nanobot stuff coming. We need guinea pigs to step right up. The most desperate. The impact of this move in the treatment of cancer and other diseases in each individual country will depend on whether there is a local adequate healthcare infrastructure that will allow for the safe use of powerful new drugs in an appropriate group of patients. Many new cancer drugs are most valuable when used in subgroups of patients identified by advanced diagnostic techniques that may not be available, except they're working on remote diagnostics. They're also working on medevac delivery drones and all kinds of stuff. So third world, poorest of poor nations, don't you worry. 21st Century Cares Act is coming to a town near you very soon. This is a point not lost, by the way, on GlaxoSmithKline CEO, Sir Andrew Whitty. Sir Andrew Whitty, who will step down from the company next year. But hopes remain that this gesture will have long-lasting impacts of its own, even if only in terms of progressing the conversation about medicine in developing countries. Right. All those poor people are going to waste in the petri dish. And nobody owns them. They don't have social security numbers, can't be sold as chattel. I don't know, guys. This just isn't good. When they decide that they're going to start giving all this profit-making bazillions away free to all you poor people because we like you, we feel bad for you, we want to be philanthropic, run away screaming. There's no free lunch, and there's always a wolf in sheep's clothing. Don't take it. There's always strings attached. Last paragraph here. Changes to patients and intellectual property systems will not solve the multifaceted challenges of improving healthcare in developing countries. However, we believe the measures outlined today add to the wider contribution GlaxoSmithKline makes to improve access to effective healthcare all around the world. So we are just to believe that large pharmaceutical companies like GlaxoSmithKline, and I believe he said Merck and Roche, are dropping their patent protections in all these third world countries where we have all the overpopulation. So the cheap generics can be made, and we just read about synthesizing chemicals from scratch and 3D printing new drugs that can be made available on demand in some sort of little vending machine. I think we should start investing in GlaxoSmithKline. Oh no, my computer is having a choke here. Let's not choke. Let's not choke. You know, everything was fine until I launched Skype this morning on this machine because I was going to play you guys a clippy. But now we're having a flash crasheroni. So let's hold on 1 second because there is an entire show all lined up. I want to talk about, we ended the show with this DNA storage. Come on. We ended the show with this DNA storage story. And if I can't get there, I'll have to go hit the notes. I'll have to go on the other machine and hit the notes. But I think it was millions of years of storage and 100,000 terabytes. Some beyond insane amount of data that, of course, this will be bad. I have two machines that are all fully locked up on me right now. And it would be really bad. Oh, come on. I'm not awake enough to just like rant on nothing either. Oh, something went wrong. That's what it says. Well, thank God for that because I wouldn't have known. Come on. All right. I'm going to start doing the unhappy elephant song in a minute. The threat is out there. I've thrown down the gauntlet. Oh. All right. Well, let's try this. I'm going to start all over here on the other machine. I really don't want to have to do the unhappy elephant. Hold on, I'm almost there. I can do the whole chorus too. All right, here we go. Very slowly, but it's here. Let's just see if we can click. Yay. All right, DNA storage. I don't know how I'm going to rebuild all these other links, but we'll just have to wing it. All right. So we ended the show yesterday then looking at this DNA storage that Microsoft is involved in, which I thought was somewhat odd, though understanding that they have this Cyber Patrol Center that is working with law enforcement agencies across the globe. Where? Oh, in Seattle. And where were they working on this? Oh, in Seattle. I'm pretty sure that's what we read yesterday. Yes. It's very convenient. Yes, Washington. University of Washington. And Microsoft researchers up in Seattle are working on this DNA storage, encoding, and retrieval system. Researchers at the University of Washington and Microsoft are developing one of the very first complete storage systems to house digital data in DNA. And the news comes as the digital universe is expected to hit 44 trillion gigabytes by 2020. And we've talked about digital DNA quite a few times before. We know that they've been doing research on this for at least the last few years, I would say more. We probably didn't know about. But this is quite significant as they are working on a daily basis to crack all the mysteries of the human code and the code that makes everything alive and manipulate, slice and dice and use CRISPR technology to add and remove proteins to, of course, cure disease, or who knows, maybe to create the next Minotaur. This is pretty disturbing to me that they are going to use now the building blocks of life to store freaking cat pictures. Okay, it's one of the first stories I saw in this. It wasn't about data with quotation marks, like big data in a big data center where you would need 44 trillion gigabytes to store, I don't know, personal dossiers of every person on the planet connected and collected by Microsoft Cyber Patrol Center. Because, of course, that was the first thing in my mind. But they're talking about storing photographs and spreadsheets and like things that after you're dead isn't probably going to mean much of anything. So it's just kind of bizarro that here we're talking about consumer uses for this. Life has produced this fantastic molecule that, we're just going to, we've relegated life to such a corner in the back room that, DNA, shmDNA, we're just going to use it to store cat pictures. I can't even get over this. Life has produced this fantastic molecule called DNA that efficiently stores all kinds of information about your genes and how a living system works. It is very, very compact and very durable, says co-author Louis Sees, U of W, Associate Professor of Computer Science and Engineering. We are essentially repurposing. We are repurposing DNA to store digital data, pictures, videos of Nana, and documents of, I don't know, the last year's taxes in a manageable way for hundreds of thousands of years, potentially. The team of bioengineers and computer science and electronic engineers were able to encode data from 4 image files into the nucleotide sequence of the synthetic DNA snippets, and this was achieved by converting the long strings of ones and zeros in the digital data into the 4 building blocks of the DNA sequence, A, T, C, G. The synthesized DNA molecules were then dehydrated for long-term storage. Wow. Woo! That just left me with like a really sad and lonely feeling. So they took all the zeros and ones and all your data and then mapped it to the ATCG and the DNA and then just dehydrated it all for long-term storage. But miraculously, when researchers reversed the process by retrieving the correct sequence from a large pool of DNA and then reconstructing the images without losing a single byte of information, it was absolutely incredible, according to the University of Washington. To make it easier to find the images they had encoded, researchers put the equivalent of zip codes and street addresses into the DNA sequence to facilitate easier retrieval. Researchers also used Huffman coding for lossless data compression, according to TechWorm. So they're not only encoding digital information into DNA, but then they're putting some sort of indexing system into the DNA itself, and then using data compression to boot. Now, this is important because some of the rest of the stuff we're going to talk about here, there's actually now programming languages for the building blocks of life. How do you go from ones and zeros to ATCGs really doesn't matter. Really matters because if you use a smart approach, you can make it very dense and you don't get a lot of errors, says co-author George Seeling. But if you do get it wrong, you get a lot of mistakes. Researchers went up against a punishing deadline. The world is producing data faster than it can create new storage in the... Yeah, tell me about it. I'm almost out of storage here. Both hard drives on my server are at 95%. And my archive drive is at about 40%. So... I don't know. And I just bought that archive drive, probably 6 months ago. Yeah, they're absolutely right. It is filling up. And I mean, you don't want to delete stuff, but at some point, you got to kind of draw a line as to what's important and what isn't. Researchers were up against a punishing deadline, blah, blah, blah. The data collected by people, businesses, and devices worldwide is expected to hit 44 trillion gigabytes by 2020. And that is a tenfold increase from 2013. Researchers said DNA molecules can store information for many millions of times more densely than existing technology for digital storage, such as flash drives and hard drives, as well as magnetic and optical media. And those systems degrade after a few years, while DNA can preserve information for centuries. And I thought we read about something not too long ago where they were using some sort of DNA, I thought, and encasing it in glass. There was something that they were doing, encasing it in glass, and it had like a million-of-year lifespan. It was pretty incredible. Not that even millions from years from now, if there is even any intelligent life still left on this planet, anyone will care about your cat pictures. I don't understand why that would be so important. All right. So now we're going to see the big moment of truth is coming. Oh, computer. Here we go. So now we're going to talk about the bastardization of the building blocks of life, and to kind of point out how far off the rails this stuff has gotten, this merging of man and machine and this complete disregard for the sanctity of any life whatsoever. The fact that we can just slice and dice anything in a lab and it's free game now. And look how wonderful it is. I have real issues with all this stuff, and trust me, I'm not a prude. I'm not a Bible thumping cult member that follows along blindly. I do a lot of research and I draw a lot of my own conclusions, and I'm very vocal about them as well, as anyone who's listening to the show can attest. But I don't agree with any of this at all. And we can see, and I think we fully established how dangerous some of this technology is. Really gets me about this CRISPR, where they're slicing and dicing everything and trying to trim out genetic diseases and fix them all up, because it's going to be great for you and me, is that just last year, there were multitudes of stories that came out talking about the dangers of CRISPR technology and how, the terrorists under every bed could turn this into a bioweapon that could completely wipe out the human race. But then we read a story yesterday and the day before about the CRISPR apocalypse, I titled it, where they were sending out copies of that CRISPR bacteria to anyone and everyone who asked for it around the globe on a postcard. How is that even possible? How is nobody controlling any of this man's science? There was an interview, and I mentioned it, and maybe what we could do here. Let's see if we could do this. This might be a good kickoff here. If we can bring in my Skype. I don't know. It usually ruins the show, so I don't know why I'm even doing this, but we'll see. We'll see. Because there was that Jennifer Dowda video. Oh, it might let me. It might let me. I don't know. It feels like a Monday. Yesterday went too well. Oh. I think I'm connected. I don't know what that did, but it looks kind of funky. All my buttons are grayed out. And instant messaging is not available with yourself. I don't know. I might have to kill this. Everything is very grayed out. And, here we go. Let's see. I don't know. I don't hear the telltale hiss. It looks like it's still trying to connect me. Oh, I don't know why I even did this. Now everything's in now responding mode. Oh, chalk this show up. Oh, well, for some reason, look at that. I guess it doesn't like the Julie Stan account anymore because it is online. Nothing I sent out of here is sent to anybody yesterday, including myself, and it can't connect to UCY.tv or UCY Radio. So, all right, I guess we're going to kill this. Anyway, so don't worry about it. Just take my word for it. Take my word for it that the potential for danger with this gene editing and mad science gone mad is beyond anything that we've ever understood before. With the genetic modification, the mosquitoes, and a lot of the experimentation that they were doing in the lab there that we dug deep into way back, they figured out how to do things like gene driving it, where they could make a genetic modification, pass it through the entire species in one generation, and have them be wiped out before the next generation. And who's to say that couldn't happen to us as well? And I think that's why we need to definitely back up the truck and stop this technology from getting into the hands of every Tom, Dick, and Harry that wants to do genetic modification in their parents' spare bedroom in Long Island outside of New York City. I mean, I don't know. I see a little problem. All right. Anyway, here's some more mad science gone mad. We've talked about stem cells. Stem cells are what they are using to create all kinds of miraculous new 21st century cures. And they've been able to take stem cells. One of the most recent was skin cells. And I just saw it yesterday. Now they're talking about sucking fat out of your love handles. And they can make them into those original pluripotent cells. And then coax them into, what are they called? Endothelial, something like that, cells, to be able to make a cure for diabetes using your love handle cells, which is very bizarre. But yes, it's fat cells, and this is a story on this very thing. New stem cell treatment. So now it's not using skin cells and then chemically coaxing them into stem cells. Now this is using fat cells. New stem cell treatment using fat cells could repair any tissue in the body, and human trials are expected in 2017. In the world's first, Australian scientists have figured out how to reprogram adult bone or fat cells to form stem cells that could potentially regenerate any damaged tissue in the body. The researchers were inspired by the way salamanders are able to replace their lost limbs. Yes, I had a story on that a couple weeks back. And developed a technique that gives adult cells the ability to lose their adult characteristics, multiply and regenerate multiple cell types, what is known as multipotency, which means that the new stem cells can hypothetically repair any injury in the body, from severed spinal cords to joint and muscle degeneration. Now, I can guarantee you that the rich billionaires that are funding a lot of this longevity research are probably falling off a chair right now, because this is the Holy Grail. Says, yes, it is a pretty big deal because there are currently no adult stem cells that naturally regenerate multiple tissue types. This technique is a significant advance on many of the current unproven stem cell therapies, which have shown little or no objective evidence that they contribute directly to new tissue formation. We are currently assessing whether adult human fat cells reprogrammed into induced multipotent stem cells can safely repair damaged tissue in mice, with human trials expected to begin in late 2017. Wonder if they're going to do those human trials in third world poor nations. Well, right now, although it's an exciting and much hyped field to study, stem cell therapy still has a number of limitations, primarily because the most useful cells are embryonic stem cells, which are taken from developing embryos and have the potential to become any cell type in the body. Now, those skin cells, though, I thought they were able to do that chemically as well. But they also have the tendency to form tumors and cannot be transplanted directly to regenerate adult cells. So I did not know that. So there are still even limitations to embryonic stem cells. But instead, researchers are able to use tissue-specific adult cells, which can only turn into the cell types in their region in the body. For example, lung stem cells can only differentiate into lung tissue, so they are not as versatile as scientists need. So scientists have worked out how to reprogram adult stem cells into induced pluripotent stem cells, which is the IPS, the type of stem cell that is even more flexible than multipotent stem cells, but requires the use of viruses. Ding, 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 ding. And this is some of the stuff that we were talking about. This is how they're modifying things. They're using these viruses to invade cells to then reprogram. And this is kind of getting around old school GMOs. They're even doing this stuff in foods. I first read about this, I think, in regards to the GMO tomato. I'd watched a science video about how they had crossed tomatoes and some sort of Arctic flounder using viruses to go in and infect the tomato cell and then make these changes. And I don't know if they were using CRISPR with that as well or what, and then replacing the genes, because that's exactly what CRISPR does. It unzips the DNA, cuts out the targeted DNA that you've targeted, and then replaces it and zips in the new sequence that you want to add. But it's pretty frightening how they can do this and just zip. But anyway, it requires the use of viruses in order for the cells to be reset, which is not ideal to help treating patients. So that's why this new research is just so exciting. So we could take fat cells out of your love handles and reprogram them. Embryonic stem cells cannot be used to treat damaged tissue because of their tumor-forming capability. The other problem when generating stem cells is the requirement to use viruses to transform cells into stem cells, which clinically is unacceptable. Well, good. So not in patients, apparently. We believe we've overcome these issues now, though, with this new technique. And to create this new type of stem cells, researchers have collected adult human bone and fat cells, and they treated them with two compounds, 5-axidine azacytidine and platelet-derived growth factor AB for 2 days, and this kickstarted the process of de-differentiation, which means that it started to revert them to a multipotent stem cell state. So it means it got rid of whatever some stem cells they were and took them back to like their native state. The cells were then kept in the growth factor for a few weeks while they slowly changed into stem cells, eventually becoming tissue regenerative IMS cells, which basically means that they can repair any tissue type in the body. This technique is groundbreaking because these IMS cells regenerate multiple tissue types. We've taken bone and fat cells, switched off their memory, converted them into stem cells, and they can repair different cell types once they are put back into the body. Right now, this process is only proof of concept, but the researchers are already on their way to furthering the technique and are currently investigating if human IMS cells can be transferred and repaired and repair tissue in damaged mice. So they're going to now be taking stem cells from humans and shooting them up into mice. The researchers also want to look into how the cells act at the site of transplantation. If all goes well, human trials are now expected for late 2017. First trials will focus on whether these IMS cells can heal bone, joint, and muscle tissue, helping to improve treatment for chronic back pain and injuries. Well, that would be $1 billion idea now, wouldn't it? If instead of spine surgery for, I don't know, we have deteriorating spinal, what are they called? Vertebrae that causes a lot of people problems. We have something called stenosis that a lot of people get. Lower back pain is a pretty big problem, and if they could come up with a technique that was just a little squirty squirt into the spine, it might make them $1 bazillion. So I don't know, keep an eye on that. Talking about now relegating and minimizing the value of life, they have now grown skin in the lab, and that skin has hair follicles and sebaceous glands. Using reprogrammed iPS stem cells, scientists have now successfully grown complex skin tissue complete with hair follicles and sebaceous glands in the laboratory. Using reprogrammed iPS cells, scientists from the Riken Center of Developmental Biology in Japan have, along with collaborators in Tokyo at the University of Science and other Japanese institutions, successfully grown complex skin tissue complete with hair follicles and sebaceous glands in the lab. And they were able to then implant these three-dimensional tissues into poor little mousies, and the tissue form the proper connections with other organ systems such as nerves and muscle fibers. Oh, the skin job robots are not too far away. This work opens now a whole new path of creating functional skin transplants for burn victims and other patients who require new skin. Research into bioengineered tissues has led to important achievements within the last few years, the number of different tissue types being created. But there are still some obstacles to overcome. In the area of skin tissue, epithelial cells have been successfully grown into implantable sheets, but they did not have the proper appendages, the oil secreting and sweat glands that would allow them to function as normal tissue. One important key to the development was the treatment with some sort of weird chemical, a signaling molecule, which resulted in a large number of hair follicles, making the bioengineered tissue closer to natural tissue. We are coming even closer to the dream of being able to create actual organs and skin for transplantation to replicate the function of normal tissue and organs. And they also believe that the tissue grown through this method could be used as an alternative to animal testing of chemicals. Now that I would go along with. It's really kind of horrifying, though. You know, I think back to just any of the old movies or books that we've read where they have been able to create these, bring them back to life from body parts. I mean, we are able to build body parts now and then transplant them onto a living organism and get them to graft and grow. Where's that going to leave us? Handheld surgical pen now prints human stem cells. Yes. In a landmark proof of concept experiment, researchers have now used a handheld 3D printing pen to draw human stem cells in free-form patterns with extremely high survival rates. In a landmark proof of concept, Australian researchers, again, it's in Australia, they're doing a lot of this offshoring, have used a handheld 3D pen to draw human stem cells in free-form patterns. The device, developed out of a collaboration between ARC Center of Excellence for Electromaterial Science researchers and orthopedic surgeons at St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne, his design is designed to allow surgeons to sculpt customized cartilage implants during surgery using a hydrogel bio ink. Yeah, 3D printers again, except that in the ink it's going to be stem cells. Using a hydrogel bio ink to carry and support living human stem cells and a low-powered light source to solidify the ink, the pen delivers a cell survival rate in excess of 97%. 3D bioprinters have the potential to revolutionize tissue engineering. They can be used to print cells layer by layer and build up artificial tissues for implantation. But in some applications, such as cartilage repair, the exact geometry of an implant cannot be precisely known prior to surgery, and this makes it extremely difficult to prepare an artificial cartilage implant. The BioPen is held in the surgeon's hands, allowing the surgeon unprecedented control in treating defects by filling them with the bespoke scaffolding. Professor Peter Chung, director of orthopedics at St. Vincent's, developed the concept along with ACE's director, Professor Gordon Wallace, in the development of this type of technology. It is not only possible with interactions between scientists and clinicians to identify the problem and scientists to develop a solution. The team designed the BioPen with practical constraints of surgery in mind and fabricating its use with 3D printed medical grade plastic and titanium. The device is small, lightweight, ergonomic, and sterilizable, and a low-powered light source is fixed to the device and solidifies the ink during dispensing. The BioPen research highlights both challenges and exciting opportunities, and when we get it right, we can make extraordinary progress at a rapid rate. And put in a seatbelt for that one, so they're not only going to be able to reconstruct and print. I mean, you've seen those 3D printed pens. I was looking at those one time. They're kind of cool. You get this plastic and it melts it as you move the pen around. And you can create these 3D sculptures of, dinosaurs or whatever you want. But they want to be able to use that for bone and cartilage reconstruction within the body. And I mean, we just read the story before that with all the craziness with those new types of stem cells that they could make them any type of tissue in the body whatsoever and put that in a little handheld 3D pen. I see some interesting things coming in the future for absolutely certain. All right, now let's move a little bit further into the dystopia. A programming language for living cells. Yes, people, it's happened. MIT biological engineers have created a programming language that allows them to rapidly design complex DNA-encoded circuits that give new functions to living cells. So we're going to make DNA circuits, and yes, just like an electrical circuit, they're now using DNA to make circuits and little DNA nanobots. Using this language, anyone can write a program for the function they want, such as detecting and responding to certain environmental conditions. They can then generate, so you can write a program, and then you can generate a DNA sequence that will achieve it. What? Oh, we've come to the point, people, of our own destruction. We can now take anything we want to do. Let's do, biosense this or that and make it respond, and then let's generate the DNA sequence and create some sort of monster DNA. This is literally a programming language for bacteria, says Christopher Voigt, an MIT professor of biological engineering. You need a text-based language, just like you're programming a computer. And then you take that text and you compile it, and then it turns it into a DNA sequence that you then put into a cell, and the circuit runs inside the cell. Voigt and colleagues at Boston University and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, known as NIST, have used this language, which they describe in the April 1st issue of Science, to build circuits that can detect up to 3 inputs and respond in different ways. Future applications for this kind of programming include designing bacterial cells that can produce a cancer drug when they detect a tumor. See, guys, this is going to be those little DNA nanobots, I'm telling you. So it's going to be able to be inside your body, and when it finds a tumor, it can automatically produce the drugs right inside of you. How frightening. Future applications of this kind of programming can include designing bacterial cells that can produce a cancer drug when they detect a tumor, or create yeast cells that can halt their own fermentation process if too many toxic byproducts build up. And the researchers also plan to make the user design interface available where? Oh, on the web, so anybody can write applications that will go in and create itself its own little DNA sequence. I wonder if they're partnering up with AdGene. So they're going to be able to build little sequences that can then be unzipped, zip, cut out, and zipped in using CRISPR technology. Wonder if that's going to be possible. I don't know. This technology is moving so fast. Like I said the other day, there's so much coming. I'm having trouble understanding how all these pieces fit together. I'm having trouble understanding how all this is going to benefit us, and I'm having a lot of trouble understanding how letting all this out into the wild is going to benefit humanity without any protections, without any stops, without any ethical or moral code. These people are just like, oh, look how cool this is. I created a programming language that can turn programming into DNA code. And someone else has the technology to be able to splice and dice that code, and we'll just make these into little bacteria that then could develop drugs with synthetic molecules. we're engineering our own destruction, people. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's only bad endings from any of this stuff. None of this is being controlled. It's just being set out into the wild for any lunatic to do bad things with. And don't think that's not going to happen if it hasn't already. Over the past 15 years, the Zika virus, it's a lot scarier than we thought. What? I don't know, guys. I really think that it is going to be the Isle of Dr. Moreau here in the not too distant future. Over the past 15 years, biologists and engineers have designed many genetic parts such as sensors, memory switches, and biological clocks that could then be combined to modify existing cells and add new ones. Oh, really? That's news to me, but I guess so. However, designing each circuit is a laborious process that requires great expertise and often a lot of trial and error, and you have to have this really intimate knowledge of how those pieces are going to work and how they're going to come together. But users of this new programming language, however, need no special knowledge at all of genetic engineering. Yes, there's no problem. We don't see any trouble with that, no. You could be completely naive as to how genetic engineering and any of it works. And that's what's really different about all of this, says Voigt. You could be a student in a high school, and you can go to a web-based server and type out the program you want, and then it spits you back the DNA sequence. The language is based on Verilog, which is commonly used to program computer chips to create a version of the language that will work for cells. The researchers designed computing elements such as logic gates and sensors that can be encoded into the bacterial cell's DNA. And the sensors can then detect different compounds such as oxygen or glucose, as well as light, temperature, acidity, and other environmental conditions. Users can also add their own sensors. It is very customizable, he says. The biggest challenge was designing the 14 logic gates used in the circuit so that they wouldn't interfere with each other. Once placed into the complex environment of a living cell. In his current version of the programming language, these genetic parts are optimized by E. coli again, but the researchers are working on expanding that language for other strains of bacteria, including bacteroides, 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 commonly found in the human gut. And yeah, that's something we got to talk about one of these days. They are talking about being able to reprogram some of your gut bacteria, and that's frightening because we need to worry about that. They also are expanding the language for Pseudomonas, Pseudomonas, which often live in plant roots, so we can bastardize the plants as well as yeast Saccharomyces cerevisiae. I don't know, this is a little much for my eyes here in the morning. It would allow users to write a single program and then compile it for different organisms. Oh my God, to get the right DNA sequence for each one. So that's just like us writing a program here for mobile. And for $29.95, you can have a little program that goes through and recompiles it for each of your different mobile OSs, like Android, Apple OS, Windows OS, and then you could do the same thing if you wanted to write an application for Windows and an application for Mac. It's just the compiler. Using this language, programmers, they programmed 60 circuits with different functions. 45 of them worked correctly the very first time that they were tested. And many of these circuits were designed to measure one or more environmental conditions. These are biosensors, such as oxygen or glucose, and respond accordingly. Another circuit was designed to rank 3 different inputs and then respond based on the priority of each one. And one of the new circuits is the largest biological circuit ever built, containing 7 logic gates and about 12,000 base pairs of DNA. Oh my God, guys. They are literally, so now we have this programming language for DNA to make these sequences, and you don't need to know anything at all about genetic engineering to be able to create them. Of course, another advantage of this technique is speed. Yes, we could engineer our own demise faster than ever now. Till now, it would take years to build these types of circuits. And now you just hit the button, boop, and immediately you get a DNA sequence to test. His team plans to work on several different applications using this approach. Bacteria that can be swallowed, here we go, to aid in the digestion of lactose. Bacteria that can live in plant roots and produce insecticide if they sense the plant is being under attack. And yeast that can be engineered to shut off when they are producing too many toxic byproducts in a fermentation reaction. So there you go, guys. Swallowing these new DNA bacterial sequences to be able to do things to your gut flora. How long is it going to be before they're zipping sequences in and out of living things and replacing them? So I guess I have 3 stories on that dig into more detail, but I don't know if we really want to do any more detail on that, especially with the last minute of the show. Here we go. DARPA. This is where we're going to end it. We gotta love DARPA. Co-evolving antivirals aim to keep ahead of fast-changing viruses. Good old DARPA is a new program that aims to develop adaptive therapies that are able to outpace viral mutations. Yes, of course, Zika, Ebola, dengue, influenza, and chickamauga, these are but a few among the growing cadre of viruses that today pose serious health threats to U.S. troops, as well as civilian populations in the United States and around the world. Vaccines exist, but few of these infectious diseases have vaccines. And since these viruses have an uncanny ability to mutate and morph as they reproduce, those vaccines are quickly outdated. So that is why flu vaccine manufacturers must now produce new versions. But we'll get rid of that. We are now going to create a therapy or vaccine that adapts in real time and it shapeshifts as targets and viruses do. All right, guys, we'll start there tomorrow. Make sure you stick around. Kevin Blanche is up live next, and we will catch up with you